Okay, so good morning all. Here are the things which we're going to be working on today. First is we're going to work on our annotated bibliography. So we'll talk about that pacing calendar and where we need to be in order to safely make our deadline, okay? And we're working with the editorials that are friendly and supportive of our point of view, okay? The second thing we're going to do is I need you guys to pick the source for what we're going to work on next class period. I need you to be thinking that. So I'm going to show you how to use the UT Library database to find a peer-reviewed journal, okay? Then the third thing we're going to do is anybody who is still having trouble finding a book, you're confused about the assignment, all that stuff, okay? You're going to stick around with me and I'm going to answer questions and walk you through everything, okay? So first is pacing calendar and our works cited, our annotated bibliography for our Ally articles. Next step is finding a peer-reviewed journal, and finally we'll stick around for any questions that we have, okay? All right. Okay, so let's start with that pacing calendar. So here we are. It's April 7th. And this is our last day for Editorial Ally. You'll see on Friday, we'll be working on the peer-reviewed journal, okay? So when I say it's our last day for Editorial Ally, what does that mean? Well, in my mind, that means that you have done the work. So in Google Classroom, if you look under Annotated Bibliography, you should have written your thesis statement, and you should have picked 2 editorials and filled out each document. Okay, one for Editorial Ally 1, one for Editorial Ally 2. And if you've done this and done the thinking of it, then I think writing the annotated bibliography entry will be cake. It'll be really easy for you guys, okay? All right, so we've got the annotated bibliography draft here. I have redone some things that I want to kind of walk you through, okay? So for the annotated bibliography draft, the only thing here is just that document for you. Each entry should have that works cited bibliographic information. Each entry should have 175 to 250 word annotation. And that's a summary or reflection of each source. And then the guidelines state that it will discuss the significance, relevance, and importance of the source. So all that is just a reminder for you. Real thing I want to show you. So that's where you're going to do your work, is in the annotated bibliography draft. But here's what I really want to show you. I got all your rubrics, okay? I went through Canvas and I pulled the rubrics for each of the different types of sources you have to have, okay? And I have some examples. All of this is discussed in Module 6.4 in Canvas, so you can go right there. The first one that says Part 1 Model Annotated, I'm going to pull that up. This is what OnRamps put out. These are the OnRamps instructors and their example. So this is what I would follow most closely. Does that make sense? OnRamps instructors did it. They're your graders. This is the one I would follow the most closely. Also for you, sorry, there is an example from Purdue Al, an example from Skyline College, and then the MLA works cited page, so you can do that works cited annotation at the very top, okay? Then I have my own example. I'm literally doing this with you guys, okay? So you have my works cited, you have my worksheets that I filled out for Editorial Ally 1 and a link to that article, and then my worksheet for Editorial Ally 2 and a link to that article, right? So if you want to see how I'm working through it, this is how I'm doing it, all right? Okay, does anybody have any questions so far? This is a lot of resources and it can be overwhelming, and I'm literally doing it with you, so I definitely understand how big this task feels, which is why we're trying to break it down. Okay, so here's what I did. I went to the rubric, and we're just going to look at the rubric for Editorial Ally, okay? So if you want to hop on this document with me, you can. You would go to classwork, you would go to annotated bibliography, you would go to rubrics, and then we want the Editorial Ally rubric. Here's what it looks like. Okay, you get 10 points if you chose a persuasive article, not informational. You chose an opinion piece by a stakeholder, 10 points. You get 10 points if it supports your own position, what it is you're going to argue, which you know because you wrote your thesis. All right? You get 10 points if it was published in the right date range, okay? And for our articles, they need to be within the last 2 years. That's 2019 to 2021. Okay, 10 points or up to 10 points if you talk about the source's credibility, why they are qualified to speak about this argument. 10 points if you talk about where this was published. 10 points if you talk about the kairos or exigency. Why is the source talking about this at this moment? 10 points if you talk about how this source is going to relate to your overall project, okay? How does it fit in with the other sources and your argument, which you think you're going to be making in that research persuasive essay? 10 points if you summarize the article correctly, 10 points if you use MLA citations, 10 points if it's grammar free, okay? So those are kind of all the main things you want to do. Let's look at the Editorial Ally worksheet. Okay, so if you want to follow along with me, I'm going to go to my Editorial Ally 1 worksheet, and I've answered a lot of these questions here in this. Okay, and you can see the work I've done. I've got my link, so I know how to go back to it. What's the title? Who's the author? What's the genre? Who is talking? She's a former Marine. Who's she talking to? Readers of the New York Times, Americans. What is she talking about? Whether women should be allowed to serve in combat missions in the military. Why did she write this? Well, there have been some recent comments by military leadership, the Secretary of Defense and an Assistant Secretary of Defense, who question women's capability of serving in the infantry in those combat roles. What's going on in the world that makes this a discussion we're having now? Other countries are gender integrating their military. What's the author's main claim? I copied and pasted it. What's her ethos? She's a former Marine. She's qualified to talk about this. What is the evidence she gives? And I list that. And then I discuss some of the pathos that she uses. Okay? Any questions so far? I mean, this probably took me 20 minutes to read the article and do this thing. I need to fully read it, and then I need to break all that down. But if I include all of this stuff in my annotation, I've met the rubric requirements. These are the rubric requirements. You with me? Okay, so let's look at my annotation. If you go to my works cited, I've got the actual annotation here. My works cited is color coded for you. You will not color code yours, okay? But if you look at the very bottom of my works cited, I've got a key. I broke mine down into these 3 parts. I summarized what the source said in the first paragraph. What are the main findings of the source? Then I evaluated it. What makes her qualified to talk about this? Is this a good quality source? Then I gave a reflection. How am I going to use this in my piece? All right. Lanaya, each of this is one entry. Okay, each of this is one entry. You have to do this 6 different times. Okay, so here's what mine looks like. And this entry right here is 247 words. Okay, so this is right at the max, right at 250. Okay, so let's look at what this looks like. I've got my annotation up here with the title, the author, all of this regular works cited. So in the first one where I'm summarizing it, here's what I say. In our article, Let Women Be Warriors, former Marine Teresa Fazio argues that women can be effective members of combat troops and gives several examples of successful women combat soldiers who handled stress well. She questions the hypermasculinity of men, both soldiers and military leadership, who are either ambivalent about women combat soldiers or discount the idea entirely. She also discusses American ally Sweden, whose combat troops have gender integrated successfully. That's the summary of it. That's what happens in the article. Now, how qualified is she to talk? Who is she talking to? All of that kairos exigency, rhetorical situation, that's what I'm doing in the second paragraph. She published her piece in the New York Times in 2018 following comments by then Defense Secretary James Mattis and then Assistant Secretary Owen Wilson, himself a former Marine. Allowing women in the military would swiftly reduce combat effectiveness. Fazio doesn't dwell on these comments, but uses them to launch example after example of successful women in combat. She uses the examples to conclude that the question is not whether women can be effective in combat, but whether hypermasculinity can adjust. The examples and her patriotic conclusion: women volunteer for the infantry for the same reason men do, protect their country and their comrades, provide a strong appeal to pathos throughout the text. I'm talking about what she does there. I could definitely revise this and talk more about who the audience of the New York Times is, who she's talking to, and also focus on her experience as a Marine. I think both of those things are missing. So I think if I revise that, that's what I'll add. Finally, how am I going to use this with the rest of mine? The examples in this piece and Fazio's background as a former Marine will make this text a valuable source in supporting my central claim that women do belong in combat leadership positions. Okay? Now I've covered everything that's in that rubric. The only other thing I need to do is I need to check, did I talk about why this piece is significant, how it's relevant, and how it's important? And I think I did that. I think I said her examples are important, relevant, I need this piece, and part of my overall argument. So that's one entry, okay? Okay, how are we doing out there? Are we feeling overwhelmed? Or are we feeling okay? Talk to me, people. Crickets, that's definitely not good. Okay, Natalie feels okay. How about the other 13 of you on the call? How does this all tie in? Lanai, I need you to explain that. I'm not sure what you're asking. If you look, go ahead.
I'm asking how we do this for each source, and then we put this all into one essay?
Yeah, the essay, that's coming in April and May. Don't even worry about the essay. Your essay, the very last essay you write in April and May, it's due May 19th. That essay is a research persuasive essay on the thesis you wrote. What do you think should happen? You're giving your own opinion, okay? So all that we're doing right now, all of this is the research for that essay. Does that make sense?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so you have to have these 6 pieces of research, and this time, instead of just getting them and listing them in a works cited, UT is checking to make sure you understand them. And the way they're doing that is by having you write this annotated bibliography. It's essentially a mini rhetorical analysis for each one. So the longest each one of these will be is 1 page. That's the longest. They can be shorter. Mine was 247 words, I think. So I can make it shorter for sure. Okay. I'm trying to give my readers an idea of what the source says, whether it's credible, why it's important, and then what, how it's going to tie into my thinking. Okay. Kennedy's question is, okay, so the other 2 sources you need, so you've got the 2 editorial allies, the 2 that are in agreement, the hostile, the one that's in disagreement with you, and the book. You also have something called a peer-reviewed journal, which is what we're going to work on in a minute. And then you have something called a contextualizing source. And if you have taken Spanish or Latin, you know con means with, right? And then the text. So a contextualizing source is something that goes along with the text that helps explain it. If you look at the rubric for the contextualizing source with me, let's look at that really quickly. We're not there yet, but just so you guys have an idea of what's coming. the document chosen is a primary source or a specialty secondary source that furthers the understanding of the topic. It could be a legal opinion. It could be a draft of a law. It could something that's a primary source document about this topic. So there was a regulation that was passed that says women can serve in military combat. I'm probably going to use that as my contextualizing source. Okay, it's going along with this. If you use a newspaper editorial that helps us to understand better, that's only going to get you 5 points. You can use it, that's okay, but you're going to get docked 5 points for it. Does that make sense? So you want to try and find an original primary source, which means the original document that the newspaper was written about. Okay, so you want to find that original piece of text. Okay, and then the last one is the peer review, which we're going to talk about in a minute. Okay. Okay, so I hope you guys understand kind of where we're headed. And what I will do with you guys is I have done my second editorial. All right. I've got the article here, and then I filled out my second editorial piece. So I'll write that with you guys in class if you want to stick around and watch me write it. Okay. If you don't want to watch me write it, that's okay. You have all the material I've got here. Okay. But this page right here, this Editorial Ally think through sheet, this is, I think, really important, because if you have all the information on here and you put it all in your works cited annotation, you've met the rubric requirements. Okay. Okay. How are we doing? Are we good? Okay. Let's talk about how to find a peer-reviewed journal. Okay, so we're going to go to lib.utexas.org. So come here with me. I put the link in the chat. Lanaya, nope, we're submitting it all as one document. If you look at under examples, see module 6, the very first example is part 1, model annotated. This is the example. You can see the first part of it is what's called a head note. It's about 2 or 3 paragraphs. That's the last thing we're going to do as part of this assignment. Right before we turn it in, we're going to write the head note. Then it goes on to give the entry itself, and then the annotation, the explanation. Another entry, explanation, another entry, explanation, another entry, explanation, another entry, explanation. And if you look at this, you'll see that some of the explanations are several paragraphs long, and some of the entries are 1 paragraph. This one is, how many pages is this one? This one might be 9 pages, Lanaya. This one is 9 pages, yeah. It depends on you and how much you write, okay? If we tried to do 9 pages in one day, I don't think we'd do very well. So we're trying to do a little bit at a time. So your goal today is to get both editorial allies done. And then if you look back at that pacing calendar, when we meet on Friday, we're going to add another entry. And then we meet on Tuesday of next week, we're going to do another entry. And when we meet on Thursday, we'll do another entry. And then when we meet the next week, we'll do the book. And then that's all of our entries. And so if we're doing it a little bit at a time, you'll have written the whole thing in the next 3 weeks. All right. If you don't stick with me, you're going to end up having to do all of this at once. That is a bad idea, right? So we want to do just a little bit at a time. That's why I broke it up into what I think are manageable things. I think we can handle doing the 2 editorial allies right now, okay? If you zoom back, Lanaya, and try and look at the whole thing, I'm worried you're going to stress yourself out. So I just want you to zoom in on just what we're doing right now. Okay, so how do you get to a peer-reviewed journal? Hopefully you guys have joined me at the library. I'm going to go to the search bar where it says find articles, books, and more. and I'm going to put in my topic, which is women in combat. I know that people are looking at equity in the prison system. People are looking at gender and pay and sports. People are looking at dress code as a way of sexualizing women and as opposed to men. I know there's a lot of different topics out there. So you're going to type in your topic and it's going to pull up everything. This time, instead of a book, we want a peer-reviewed journal. So do you see this menu on the left-hand side? I'm going to click peer-reviewed journal. And that's what's coming up, okay? Peer-reviewed journal, all right? Now, I want to sort by stuff that's available online so I can get it right now. And you know my editorials had to be within the last 2 years. My peer-reviewed journal might have something different. So I'm going to come over here to the Annotated Bibliography essay module, and I'm going to check the requirements. Okay. One scholarly peer-reviewed journal article published within the last 10 years. So I'm going to set my search requirements in the UT library for 2011 to 2021, and I'm going to click refine. Okay, and this is, there are 76,000 results. And if you see this purple button beneath the entry, it says peer reviewed. This must be a peer reviewed journal, which means the author's peers looked at it and offered suggestions or comments. If you can't get your article peer reviewed, it means it's pretty flawed. Okay, you didn't do your research or your opinions aren't supported. Okay, so having it peer reviewed says something about the credibility of this piece. So you need to have it be peer reviewed. Fighting stereotypes, public discourse about women in combat, future photographs of U.S. women in combat, gatekeeping and hierarchy influences. You can see that there's a bunch of them here. Now all I have to do is go through them and pick the peer reviewed journal I think is going to be most supportive to my piece. If this one's talking about photographs, and I am thinking that probably isn't going to go along with my thesis that women should be allowed in combat leadership, right? But this one might, public discourse about gender, and if I scroll down, it's got a description, okay? This is a response to opinion editorials about women in combat and how that contributes to the literature on women in the military by explaining how contests over sex, gender, essentialism, and diversity underlie public debates. I'm not sure this is right on target, so I'm going to keep looking, right? So as I'm looking at this really long list, I am asking myself some questions. Just based on the title, is this something I want to investigate further? And then I'll pull up the abstract. Is this something I want to investigate further? Okay? So that's what I want you to do. I want you to find a peer-reviewed journal. Now just be aware, it tells you here how many pages it is. This one is 436 to 459, so that's 23 pages. This one is 32 through 55, so that's 23 pages. This one is 94 to 100, that's 6 pages, right? So just be aware of this. Pages 7 to 11, that's 4 pages. Pages 1 to 3, okay? So you get to choose this. If you don't think you have the time or want to dig into a 23-page journal article, pick a different one. There are 76,000 results for me. Okay, I'm sure you will find a large number of results as well. Okay, does anybody have any questions about the peer-reviewed journal? Okay, so your goal today is to get the works cited entries for both of your editorial allies and for you to pick the peer-reviewed journal. I will post a worksheet just like our editorial ally worksheets for the peer-reviewed journal right here under Annotated Bibliography. Okay, if you feel comfortable, like you understand this, you may go and work on it. If you need help, I need help with my thesis, finding the right topic. I need help finding the peer-reviewed journal. I need help finding a book. I'm still a little behind there. I need help with whatever. Stick around and let me help you. Okay? Just like we were in class. It'd be just like you coming up to my desk or raising your hand and having me come over to your desk. Okay? So if you stay on this call, it's so I can help you. Otherwise, you guys can hop off and work. I will be active on this call all the way up until lunch. So if you have questions and you've left, you can come back. I really am not leaving the call until the end of class. Lanai, that sounds great. Okay. Also, if you just need a talking down because you're freaking yourself out, I'm also here to help with that. Okay? Okay. All right, so I am going to stop recording.